This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this is the post-trade deadline emergency pod show. And the topic is clearly about all of the heavy traffic, the movements going on, players flying all over the United States of America in this frenzy to take the crown of the Eastern Conference. So my question to my man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, on the move as we speak. Hopefully he ain't passing any, he ain't blowing through any John Q laws in our efforts to have this conversation. My man Warren Shaw, I got to ask you, brother, what is the big deal?
Man, this was one hell of a day, I think, in the NBA, and movement galore. You know, what we like as fans and as people who come to the league on a regular basis. I'd have to say the biggest thing is something that we saw coming for the most part, was Marc Gasol being moved to the Toronto Raptors. So it's interesting you said the United States of America and Canada, so maybe just North America in general. I feel like, that is probably more an accurate statement there, because Raptors made a big move today, and clear or not clear, they only had like 10 players now after a result of today's trade. So, they're going to be very busy in the buyout market as well, too, man. So that's probably the biggest deal, the biggest trade. But we'll get into all of them, man, because, again, it was an exciting day of movement. And as you alluded to, primarily a lot of guys came east, which is going to make the Eastern Conference playoffs that much more exciting.
And I think a lot of this, a lot of people had their attention focused on the whole situation with Anthony Davis. And I think people were losing sight that there is a much bigger, quote unquote, as Rachel Nichols would call it, arms race that was taking place in the Eastern Conference. And teams recognize that no one was really separating themselves, whether you are the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors, the Philadelphia 76ers. But I will say, though, Shaw, that two teams definitely are pushing their chips all in, and that being the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors. And if you're talking about two teams that were literally going tit for tat within the last 24 hours before this trade deadline, basically expired, you can make the argument that not only the Milwaukee Bucks, certainly, in my opinion, we'll talk about the Mirotic trade in a moment, because I don't think anybody saw that one coming. And if nothing else, that's a slap in the face to Anthony Davis. Davis is like, what? You going to move Mirotic, but you can't move me? We're going to talk about that in a moment. But what we're talking about here is teams that recognizes their weaknesses, and they are specifically, strategically putting players in place, not only for the short term to make this run for the finals, but also might be making a play long term by the executives to say to their superstar, hey, we are all in for what you need. Tell us what you need, and we're going to try to make it happen.
Yeah, I think those are great points, especially, again, when we talk about the East specifically, and not to jump around too much, but I feel like Philadelphia made a move involving the LA Clippers, which pretty much signified, okay, the Clippers are trying to create cap space for what they want to do in the summer, but it seemed like they were kind of punting on this season. Then they turned around and made some other moves that, was like one of those things, like Doc Rivers seems like he can really coach players who are on the come up, so to speak, or who aren't supposed to be here. So they made some subsequent moves now that kind of puts them back in the hunt, at least, if you will, to not necessarily be a punting team this season. They might be still trying to compete for a playoff spot while still remaining their cap flexibility. But really, ultimately and truly, again, without getting too much into winners and losers, you have to give a shout out to Elton Brand, at least on paper, man, because he wasn't afraid to deal. He got a lot of things done for his team and his roster, and the Philadelphia 76ers, along with the Toronto Raptors, are looking real scary come the rest of this regular season.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about we'll talk about the trade regarding Marc Gasol in a moment. But let us talk about what really sparked all of the movements that have happened within the last 3-4 hours. because of the deal that was done last night with Tobias Harris being moved to the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, if people have not been paying attention, this was reported by Adrian Wojnarowski in the ESPN crew, I believe. So there was numerous Woj bombs. I mean, my man was just spraying it like Hiroshima. Okay, so let's just make that clear. He was all over this. But Shams, our man Shams, was also on top of it. There were also reports from the Athletic. Everybody had their fill-in to grab a headline about the latest deal that went down prior to the trade deadline. So let's talk about the Sixers' move to get Tobias Harris. The Sixers sent Landry Shamet, who is a nice up and coming role player. He was marginally good for what the Sixers had coming off of the bench. Wilson Chandler. We had just talked about Wilson Chandler, Shaw, that we were saying it sucks that this guy cannot stay healthy because he is such a great multifaceted, multi-tool player. Mike Muscala, a 2020 first round pick, an unprotected first round pick for 2021 that came from via Miami, and in a couple of second round picks for 2021 and 2023. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And one of the big caveat to that is, at least on the LA side, getting that 2021 Miami first rounder, which a lot of people are projecting to be, somewhere in the lottery, because Miami is not really doing much and can't really do much to help their roster, although they made a minor move, dealing Tyler Johnson. But yeah, that is pretty much the framework of what happened. And let me just say this before we really dive in. I tweeted this out, some time ago. This trade deadline probably leads leads all trade deadlines, and I didn't know that guy was available. I think that a lot of GMs are finding out, well, damn, you know what I mean? If I had known, I would have made an offer. I would have called and whatever. But that just kind of goes to show is like, you know what? Closed mouths really don't, closed mouths don't get fed. You have to make calls. You have to inquire. And, I don't know how many of these are initiated by, quote unquote, like, did the Clippers call Philadelphia and say, hey, well, what do you think about Tobias? Or if it was the other way around. But, you're hearing that from a lot of GMs, right now saying, damn, I didn't know Tobias Harris was available. I didn't know Harrison Barnes was available. Even dating back to last week, I didn't know Porzingis was available. And the Knicks seemed like they maybe wanted to deal with one specific team in that anyway. But nevertheless, this trade deadline definitely leads the league in the what the hell? Who knew he was even out there to be had to begin?
Well, I think that you could also look at this in two different perspectives, right? First of all, this is a Jerry West composition, right? So that in itself should already tell you that if you're going to come if you're going to come to Jerry West, you need to step correctly, right? And so Elton Brand clearly did not walk into this lightly if there was any inclination that Tobias Harris would even remotely be available, okay? Even if the guy is having an all-star type of season, and yes, he has been snubbed. Another conversation for another day. But the fact of the matter is this, and I think it adds on to the point that you're emphasizing about GMs and organizations doing their due diligence. But I think it also highlights another thing that isn't getting talked about, Shaw, because we just saw the opposite effect of what happens if you are the Los Angeles Lakers. You can't just rely on the mystique of the Lakers to just say to the Pelicans, I think you want to do this deal because we're just going to give you all of these things. And none of these things remotely address where the Pelicans really want to be if they're planning to give up a superstar player. Now, Tobias Harris is not Anthony Davis. However, when you have a player that is posting all-star numbers and he is even going to be in the conversation of any kind of trade negotiations, you have to walk in respecting the other side. And so clearly Elton Brand respects what Jerry West has done, not just for, as an executives across the board, but also for the teams that he has brought to success. He understands that you just can't roll up on this dude lightly. And until many people are going to look at this and say, oh my God, the Clippers got a haul. But if you are the Philadelphia 76ers, and this has always been about the process, and you just went through getting Jimmy Butler on this team, and now you have Joel Embiid and you've got Ben Simmons. You can't just, again, half-ass your way to what you're potentially trying to do if the Eastern Conference is this wide open.
Well, what you're saying, it's so interesting because it leads me to like so many different points and then kind of subsequent trades. Let's start, let me just try to focus here on what Elton Brand did. people are like, listen, yeah, that 2021 Miami pick is, pretty valuable, but here you get a guy who now you get the bird rights and have the ability to kind of go over the cap if your owner will allow you to re-sign him and Tobias Harris, as you alluded to, having an all-star caliber season. They traded for Jimmy Butler, a month or two ago. He's there and have the ability to try to re-sign him. You've already paid Embiid. His contract is going to kick in. You have Simmons still kind of under the rookie scale. So it all kind of fits from a timing standpoint. Then you go out and make another trade later on in a lesser deal where you end up kind of getting another pick from Orlando. And a guy like you get, and when you trade Markel Fultz off, get a pick from him from Orlando, get Jonathan Simmons to kind of help you with your bench as well too. Brand did an amazing job, I think, overall, depleting and then repleting some of the resources that he had available to him.
I completely agree with you. And so let's go ahead and we can also go down to the digs, because I think at the end of the day, when we finish this conversation show, we're going to be saying who really won out by trade deadline, who really won the day, so to speak. So one of the things that we've been talking about, or a lot of people have been talking about, is the Philadelphia 76ers, their bench production has been sorely lacking. And so in less than 24 hours, they wind up getting Boban Marjanovic. If nothing else, the Tobo combination comes from LA to Philadelphia. So you got personality and playoff added in the mix, right? So people in Philly are going to be very happy about that. You also get Mike Scott, right? Mike Scott, quality dude. Remember the productivity he gave the Atlanta Hawks, right? I think that he's going to find some minutes with under Brett Brown as they continue to make this run. The Sixers also get Jonathan Simmons. Hey, a couple of seasons ago, when he was in San Antonio, he was responsible for helping the Spurs maintain themselves while Kawhi Leonard was going through his health issues. And that is what propelled him to getting his deal when he wound up in Orlando. Now, he hasn't lived up to the hype in Orlando, but I think that they just did not utilize him well. I think he's a serviceable player who I think is going to go back to his natural position, which is coming off the bench and giving quality minutes for that starting four. They also wind up getting James Ennis. So to me, Brand is doing exactly what he feels is necessary to address the issues that the Sixers may wind up running into come playoff time, which is having a bench. And more importantly, may help to start shaving off minutes from their starting five, which is going to be critical because you do not want these guys to run thin by the time the playoffs come.
Right. And it's just, everything you've said, I think has been great because it's a great setup to a next point. By doing all of what you just said, it makes them more attractive again, like they were last year in the buyout market. So let's say they want to add still maybe another shooter. Maybe they still could use a backup point guard. I mean, I know TJ McConnell has been more than serviceable, but they could probably still find something like that, and maybe a guy who can actually shoot the ball a little bit better than he can on a regular basis. I think those are ways that, now with this team and this roster, guys that become available in the buyout market, like a Wayne Ellington or something like that, you might be, I could go over there and be the missing piece, and add something. Although Ellington, again, I know is not a point guard, he is more of a wing and plays that shooting situation. But other guys out there who might become available, even like a Shelvin Mack or something like that. Philadelphia is set up very, very nicely, and it's all a direct result of Elton Brand being shrewd, making the calls, negotiating in a way that helps his team for the now and definitely for the future as well.
He must have had a sleepover with Jerry West before the trade deadline, man. Saying just kind of had some cookies and milk and just started reminiscing about, Jerry West days in Golden State and Memphis.
Yeah, man. I can't say enough about the job he's done. And yeah, it still needs to work out. On paper, it looks great. You still got to get these personalities to mesh within the locker room. But again, keeping some assets because they still have a treasure trove of draft picks as well too. And who knows, man? Like they could get real wild with it. Like you don't know. While Harris and Butler would probably you want to try to sign those guys or whatever the case may be. Can you figure out a way to do some sort of crazy sign and trade and then throw away your picks and then maybe get into the Anthony Davis situation since he was not moved at the trade deadline? I think Philadelphia has so many options. It will be really interesting to see what happens, the rest of this regular season, how they mesh, like I said, and then matriculate through the playoffs. Who do they run up against? Who do they beat? And how does it go for them? And how do they look just ultimately? But they are really in a good situation, and they didn't sit on their laurels, man. And by far and away, to me, I think of the top tier teams, the most active. Houston made a lot of small deals, on their side of the Western Conference, but Philadelphia, in terms of things that they did to really address what their needs were, in addition to setting themselves up for the future, I don't know if anybody did a better job than they did.
All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about the team the other teams that have helped cause this chain reaction of movements in the Eastern Conference, and we'll rifle back to our point regarding the Toronto Raptors, because that deal primarily was really one of the final deals prior to the deadline expiring. So the Toronto Raptors get Marc Gasol from Memphis. The Raptors have agreed to send Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, and their 2024 second round pick. Now, on the surface, Shaw, when I look at this, you clearly can see that Masai Ujiri is going all in on this premise that with Kawhi Leonard, they want a formidable starting lineup that is going to be able to compete in a 7-game series against any of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, right? My question is, given the fact that Marc Gasol's numbers are not what they've been, over the last couple of years, is this truly addressing the point? Now, again, I'm not taking, because I still think that this is a vast improvement for what I think they're going to try and get out of that 5 position. But at this stage of the game with this type of Marc Gasol, money aside, is he the right fit for Kawhi and the type of offense that Nick Nurse has been getting out of these guys for this type of run that they're making?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think Gasol, he's an upgrade over Valanciunas, who did get a bum deal for a majority of his time there, primarily under Casey, where, getting pulled and not getting the minutes that he sometimes earned, and sometimes, he got in foul trouble and didn't earn those minutes. But I think the biggest thing you get with Gasol is, you get another leader in the locker room. You get a guy who will give you a voice. And so, while that could potentially be an issue, especially with him and Kyle Lowry, I do feel like Gasol, his biggest asset to this team is not only his defense, but his ability to pass the basketball. Valanciunas and Ibaka do not really know how to move the ball any way, shape, or form from that front court position. So now you get a guy like Gasol who you can put in the post, can see over the double team and pass out of the double team, can shoot the three, can hit the mid-range jumper, and pass from the pinch post, well, 2 free throw line extended, set solid screen. You get a guy who can really kind of help you on both sides of the basketball, like really and truly, and especially in a system that now is going to be even more predicated on ball movement. I think that's what you get with Gasol. And while you gave up a bunch of players, and a guy like DeLon Wright and such like that too, even CJ Miles, again, it allows you to be very, very active in the in the buyout season market now. And who's not going to want to at least give Toronto a look with Kawhi Leonard there, Marc Gasol there, and Kyle Lowry kind of leading the charge, Nick Nurse proving himself to be a very worthy NBA coach. It's not just what they did with Gasol, but how they set themselves up to potentially get some buyout guys as well too. And I feel like this was a good move. And for Valanciunas, hey, he goes to Memphis where he can probably get all the minutes he can handle alongside Jaren Jackson in that front court as well. I feel like it could be a good move for both of these teams.
Valanciunas is going to get his grit and grizzy on. That's going to probably be the new
and they cleared things out, man. They got rid of JaMychal Green as well too, so clearing the way for Jackson to kind of be the dude there. But no other real centers, nobody else really of true note. What's his name? Ivan Babb or something like that. I guess he's as well too. But Valanciunas should go right in there alongside Jackson and really, really get some things done. And he could put up some monster stats the rest of the way now that he's back healthy.
Oh, I'm sure like fantasy fans are going to be salivating at the opportunity to pick them up off of waivers now that move is taking place. So 2 quick points, Shaw, with regards to this move by the Toronto Raptors. As kind of an underpoint, the Nets wind up sending Greg Monroe to the Raptors, right? So again, depth, which may also be
other way around.
It's the other way around. Raptors send him to the Nets. I'm sorry, yeah.
Right.
So the Raptors,
Right.
excuse me, wind up getting they wind up getting a pick, right, from Brooklyn because of it.
Yeah, it's a second round pick.
Okay, so And so to your point, it adds on to the idea that, we think that the Raptors are not going to be done, that most of their other transactions are going to take place in the as far as the buyout market goes, right? For the Brooklyn Nets, I think this is good too, because especially now with Chris Levert expected to come back, let's keep in mind that the Brooklyn Nets are still one of those pliable teams that are expected, and possibly, if they continue to trend the way they're trending, are going to make the playoffs. Okay, so if you are the Toronto Raptors, now you've opened things up. The one thing that I'm very curious about is the combination of Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol. I feel like I'm more so confident about the combination of Kyle Lowry and Marc Gasol. When I look at how Kawhi Leonard likes to penetrate and get in the paint, and how he likes to dribble, drive, and everything like that, I tend to wonder how the ball moves between those three guys specifically. If I'm Kawhi Leonard, I hope that the spacing between him and Marc Gasol, that they work that out, and the amount of games between now and when the playoffs hit will be enough for them to kind of figure that thing out. Because you know how Marc Gasol likes to sit in a space. He doesn't tend to move the same way that the Raptors have been moving offensively. He kind of drifts and then finds his spots. So it'll be interesting to see how Kawhi Leonard makes those adjustments. But again, we talk about this with regards to superstars making the necessary adjustments in their game to make other players better. Now, you can clearly see that the Toronto Raptors as a team play better with Kawhi Leonard, whatever the motivations are. It'll be interesting to see if Marc Gasol feeds off of that and adjusts his game, as well as Kawhi adjusting their game, so they could collaborate and be one of those top tier teams riding into the playoffs. Now, the other team that obviously made a big splash, the Milwaukee Bucks. And I got to tell you, Shaw, I was totally shocked by this. I didn't see that the Bucks were going to be the ones in the running to get a guy like Mirotic. But after watching Giannis the other night basically do damage against the Washington Wizards, which I know is not a marker, but the dominance of which I've seen Giannis Antetokounmpo continue to elevate and elevate, to the point that after he finishes dunking on people and puts his gonads on people's foreheads, comes down and says, "I'm the mother effing MVP." There is something emanating in the air out of Milwaukee, and it ain't, you know what I'm saying? It ain't deer manure. It's fear the deer for real. Giannis is coming for the East, and I think people really need to take notice. And if you go and make a play to get Mirotic, that is a sure sign that the Bucks are not to be messed with come this time for the playoffs.
This is a squad that, it's funny, I was listening to, our friends over at the Open Floor podcast. We had Ben Golliver on our show, earlier in the season. And they were talking about it as like, people, for whatever reason, especially the uninitiated, those who only kind of tune in around playoff time, aren't really paying attention. They're not quite there with Milwaukee yet. And granted, they haven't had the playoff success, but everything about this team feels different. This team is very well coached now. All the deficiencies from last year have improved. They're better defensively. They shoot the three ball a lot better. They move the basketball a lot better. And they're getting, in some ways, career years out of some guys as well, too. Everything you think they need or they could have needed, they went out and addressed. Earlier in the year, they got a veteran backup point guard and a guy like George Hill who can play both sides of the basketball. He doesn't need to go out there and give you 25, 30 minutes a night. He just needs to play 15 to 18 minutes a night and be effective while he spells Eric Bledsoe, who's having a great season. Malcolm Brogdon playing great basketball. I think a much better third year than his sophomore campaign for sure. And a lot of that is a result of the system that Coach Bud has instituted. Chris Middleton, first time making the All-Star team now as a result of what's going on over there. And even the guys that they brought back in Ersan Ilyasova, and we talked about what Brook Lopez was going to mean to this team. Brook Lopez is hitting step-back threes. Brook Lopez is hitting step-back threes, spacing the floor for Giannis to go and get to the lane in the basket. Now you go ahead and add a guy like Mirotic while he has been injured for the better part of this season. As a guy, when he gets minutes, can be a double-double guy as well, too. He's not going to help you on the defensive side of the basketball. We know that. But he's a guy when Giannis is out, can help space the floor for Bledsoe if he's trying to get in there and drive and dish and penetrate as well, too. Everything that the Milwaukee Bucks and their general management have done this season specifically has been the right move, and I don't see any way that Mirotic will not work out for them as well.
The reason why I love this move, man, is Mirotic is a tree in a big forest of three ball plenty for the Milwaukee Bucks. And in a situation where teams are going to force them to really stretch the floor, they are stretching the verticality of other teams' defenses, extending them out all the way 3, 4, 5 feet beyond the 3 point line because you have to respect these guys shooting the basketball. I think you couple that with really what I want to consider has been a comeback player of the year type season that Eric Bledsoe is giving the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, it's really remarkable, Shaw, because only a couple of years ago we were kind of questioning, where does Eric Bledsoe fit in when we talk about quality guards in the NBA. And then after basically getting schooled by Terry Rozier last year in the NBA playoffs, really started wondering where was Eric Bledsoe's heart in his I think sometimes when players get moved around a lot, you begin to get exasperated by the experience of the NBA because you're really trying to fit in. Like you just want to be happy in one place for just at least a little bit so that you can kind of you know, get your feet, get under your feet, literally, right? And so now I think he really feels like he's surrounded by dudes that really believe and buy into what he thinks that he can contribute to this basketball team. Sometimes it's not even just about what you're supposed to be giving your head coach and what your head coach believes in you. It's really about what your teammates believe and what you're capable of giving them. And I think you're beginning to see that with Eric Bledsoe. He gave us glimpses of that when he was with the Los Angeles Clippers and he was playing under Doc Rivers. But now I'm beginning to realize my respect level for Eric Bledsoe is starting to rise again because now I'm beginning to see where his confidence level is starting to show on the court. And I think a lot of that is going to go a long way where when you need that versatility, because it's not just about Giannis dribble drive, penetrating, and he kicking the ball out to Mirotic. It's about what Eric Bledsoe is also doing as well, too. That dual threat of dribble drive penetration, whether it be Bledsoe, Antetokounmpo, Brogdon, or Middleton, makes Mirotic that all the more deadlier a shooter on a starting lineup that the Milwaukee Bucks have that is scoring the basketball at the rate that they're scoring right now.
Well, and you brought up a great point there because all those guys can handle the basketball and be the ball handler and pick and roll, and play that with Mirotic, or they can, like you said, elude, drive, slash to the rim, and then kick out. And Mirotic can shoot three, and he can be mid range as well too. He's obviously not a post up threat in any way, shape, or form, but that's not what he's brought there for. He's brought out there to help space the floor with that, and I can definitely see that. If they decide to slide Giannis to the three, and give Middleton a blow, or however they want to do it, if Brogdon is out or Bledsoe is out, because all of those guys basically just slot one down, when the other guy is out. You know what I mean? Brogdon can spell Bledsoe, Middleton can spell Brogdon, Giannis can spell whoever he wants to, and then you can put in Mirotic, at any one of those spots and be effective. Yeah. So underrated. I think the big loser in the Mirotic sweepstakes is obviously the Utah Jazz, who are heavily linked to him as they were to Mike Conley as well too. But to see him end up in Milwaukee, I think is about a great spot for him to even improve his value, but more so for the Milwaukee Bucks and what they're trying to do this season.
And so let's talk about that real quick, Shaw. We've talked about the winners. Um, who do you think really lost out on a prime opportunity if they couldn't get a deal done? It really damages not just their opportunity for where they might find themselves, come the end of this season, whether they make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs, but really from a long-term perspective, simply because now the market is going to be totally flooded with everybody vying for, a lot of these key free agents that their best opportunity was that they needed to have done something by the trade deadline for this season.
If you're going to go by, especially what you hear, you would say Utah. With them not really making a move, that's a problem for them, and they could have used some improvement. They could have used Mike Conley, obviously, some life. They could have used Mirotic, helped them with some shooting. Charlotte, it was pretty much almost a done deal that Gasol was heading to Charlotte. And then the last hour here, Toronto swoops in with what their offer is, and don't really know what happened with Charlotte, why that did not work out. But as they try to make a push, to be relevant in the Eastern Conference, them not getting Gasol or getting anything of any note, I think are two things that stand out to me in terms of teams that just like, damn, what happened? because we just heard so much about them, being interested and being active on the phones and trying to get in there. And it didn't work out for them. And if you want to throw some shade, the Lakers were active, but do you think it was active enough? So I don't know if you want to call them a loser because they didn't get AD because New Orleans wasn't really willing to deal, it seems like. And they did get Mike Beasley away from a toxic situation where, if he would have stayed there any longer, he might have tried to Latrell Sprewell, Luke Walton. So they made a move that, that kind of helped them. But it's interesting, though, because you feel like you might want to hold on to a guy like Zubac to maybe potentially include him in the Anthony Davis deal even into the summer. So that kind of them, to me, makes them a loser as well, too, because I didn't think they'd give up on that young guy. His first 36 are off the chart. He's played very well in the minutes he's gotten, so they gave up on him, and get Mike Muscala back or whatever it is from the Clippers. And I think he could have been used in a package, to try to entice New Orleans in the summer for AD.
I completely agree with you. I think teams that are middling teams that have been good already for sustained number of years, if there was players that were available to enhance what they currently have on their roster, if there's not an opportunity to go in there and make a play for them. Now, I'm not saying you give up the house, okay? But I am saying that you have to take into consideration what you're giving up for the greater good of what you're going to wind up getting back. And I just feel like teams like the Charlotte Hornets, teams like the Utah Jazz, you can even make the argument for for teams like the Detroit Pistons, where you're housing two-star players. Even if your intent is that you're probably going to give them away, the fact that you didn't give any of them away if you weren't committed to doing it tells me then you should have been committed to still putting together a better squad than what you're currently working with. Now, I understand that it's all about the waiting game, but sometimes you wait too long and the end of the season can completely curtail your perspective about where this team is going to go moving forward. And by the way, you're still hampered by the contractual obligations of the players that you still have on your roster. So that to me is the reason why if you're some of these middling teams that have got certain good players, certain, other players that you can move up from, you should have made that move. You should have been committed to that. One big point that you made, Shaw, that I really love and what you were saying about Zubac. This to me is a lesson for the Los Angeles Lakers and Rob Pelinka, who clearly now is recognizing the difference between being an agent and being a general manager. You have got to continue to keep making moves even when the biggest move is not being made. You have to continue to coordinate and plan and make other things happen while that other deal is being made. Because at the very least, when other teams see that you're making moves, they recognize that they're not waiting for you to do something that should be in their best interest, right? And so because the Lakers stalled and didn't make anything else happen, it really gave the perception that this was all about Anthony Davis, right? And I'm not saying that you had to trade Zubac. I'm just saying that the idea or the intent should be that if you're the Los Angeles Lakers and you have got the best player in basketball in LeBron James on your squad, and this is a team that at one point was fourth in the Western Conference, have now fallen as far as ninth to the Western Conference, it doesn't matter if Anthony Davis is going to come in. What matters is you're not going to win with that current roster, and you got to do something about it. But you don't wait for Anthony Davis in order to shake that roster up. You still do deals. And the fact that Pelinka did not do anything in that week span of them making all of these crazy deals to the Pelicans, I think really hurt the perception of the Lakers desperately wanting Davis to the point that they stalled everything that they were trying to do to make that basketball team better.
Yeah, those are great points. Really and truly, as I alluded to before too, is like, yeah, you just want to hold on to it. And I feel like I really need to look back at that deal because maybe if they would have gotten a second round pick, they traded player exemption as a result of it. Because that's the thing is, all right, well, if you got another pick out of it, even if it's second round, maybe that's something that you throw into the deal. No, it was really more or less to get rid of more cap, so Muscala an expiring deal, to acquire a Muscala who won't be a part of the future, is what I was trying to say, and then you get rid of Beasley, who's going to be a distraction in the locker room, which does have value. Like, let's not get that twisted because we didn't get to talk about it on our show. That Lakers blow up that was reported by Shams after they lost to Golden State over the weekend, and where Beasley and JaVale McGee and the like were apparently going after Luke Walton. So you get a locker room cancer out of there in the deal as well too. But it's tough. It's tough for the Lakers right now, and there are Lakers exceptionalism. But we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But it would have been nice, I think, in my opinion, to hold on to Zubac, just so again, in case you can entice New Orleans, with using him and then some of the picks that you alluded to, and obviously all the other younger guys as well too. So I do think he has some value.
All right, y'all. Let's quickly go ahead and round out some of these other big moves that have taken place that may not get as much conversation, but I certainly think deserves much for us to discuss on. The move by the Sacramento Kings to get Harrison Barnes from the Dallas Mavericks. Everybody's talking about the circumstances by how Harrison Barnes was informed about him being traded. I'm not really worried about that. I think what I was
Yeah.
more concerned about was the actual deal. Did the Sacramento Kings win on getting a guy like Harrison Barnes on their squad?
Well, this is the thing I said in the outset. Sacramento saw the Clippers look like them punting. They're battling them. 8, 9, 10 in the Eastern and the Western Conference. So they made a move to try to solidify their place and go ahead and try to take charge and hopefully pass the Clippers. But I don't know how Barnes is going to fit. In fact, though, like it's a weird situation for me. Like I don't know if I love it. I have to see it. I just kind of have to see it first. But I think Dallas is a big winner there as they clear Barnes off their books. It lets them now as also become a destination for free agency because they now have another max slot available to pair a live song to pair alongside Porzingis and Luka Doncic. But I think one of the things is that some free agents may want to see that Porzingis is healthy before committing to that. So I don't know how lucky they'll be this summer because I feel like what we saw Porzingis, but he's still a big man coming off a major injury. So you want to make sure that he's back. So they may not be able to do that right away, but if they're smart about it, and it looks like they're starting to get really smart in Dallas, so it's a good move for them. Sacramento, like I said, just trying to make sure they can get to the Western Conference playoffs, and I like the fact that they're going for it. I'm just not sure Barnes is the guy, so I have to see how the team plays out.
I do find it interesting that they did make a play for Barnes on this. I mean, listen, I don't think that it's going to be the worst thing in the world. I do think though that sometimes when you see the Sacramento Kings uh, make some kind of transaction through the course of the season, you always wonder, are they just doing this intentionally to screw up what they naturally kind of built so far for this year? I mean, I guess the reason why I say that is because Dave Yeager is a very peculiar kind of coach, right? And he seems whatever kind of funky formula he's got going on to get these guys to play above 500 basketball has been good enough so that they're still in this mix, right? Then you bring a guy like Harrison Barnes, who's just quite like he's an anomaly, dude. He just really is. You don't know what you're getting from this guy. And I guess at the same time, the very first thing that you're always trying to figure out is, what's gonna come of this team? Like who's gonna step out of the shadows to really be the face of this basketball team? And when I think about a guy like De'Aaron Fox, I think like this should be his time. Like this should be his opportunity. Then you bring a guy like Harrison Barnes, who is the $90 million man, and he's, you know what I'm saying? He had been presented as being the face of another team or the cornerstone of another team or whatever the case may be. And I don't know where to your point, I don't know where he fits into this particular fold because I think with the young pieces that you've got there, outside of winning a championship with Golden State, there really isn't much that Harrison Barnes is going to offer that basketball team that they haven't already been learning through the course of this season.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to play a more natural small forward position, I guess. Obviously he can still slot at the power forward and gives them some lineup flexibility. Kings also acquired Alec Burks. They also acquired Caleb Flanagan, in a trade for Scala or whatever the case may be. So they're going for it in some ways. They have they have an interesting roster that Yeager is going to really he's got to have to figure this out. And I'd be stunned and amazed if they didn't have a 5 to 7 game adjustment period now with these new personalities. Marvin Bagley's been kind of coming on strong now, so will he be assumed the starting power forward position, at some point over Bjelica before the season is over? A lot of questions in Sacramento, and this is a team we profiled, a month or so ago as well too, as they make this push for the Western Conference playoff.
All right, Shaw. So who is it that you were hoping to have gotten moved by the trade deadline? that didn't get moved? That you were just like,
The
oh,
short answer.
I want him. I want to see him with another jersey. I want to see him doing damage with another team. Who were you expecting to probably say got moved?
Oh, that's a short answer, and that's Mike Conley. Just again, what was put out there, they let them know that both Conley and Gasol were on the move, and they were fielding offers. Conley deal was close with Utah. Conley deal was close with Detroit, Indiana. Those three teams, and the fact that nothing happened. In a very emotionally charged 2 weeks, I think, for the Memphis Grizzlies and Conley specifically. I think it's hard. But if there was one of the two who they had to keep, or who could kind of come back and still play ball, it's definitely Conley, because Gasol is, he runs hot, and it probably would have been much more of a disaster. But I really wanted to see Conley move, and like I said, as we've talked many times, just end this era of what's going on in Memphis, and put him on to put to better pasture so he can go out there and contribute for another contender.
I would have loved to have seen Vucevic get moved, bro. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but and again, I think we talk about players that we think should have already been on the trading block, that is high value, high demand, and it just gives me room for pause when I don't see teams really looking at the landscape about what they could be getting, what they will probably have to wind up giving up for a player, you know, of this ilk. Now maybe it got maybe the idea of trying to get a guy like Vucevic was scared off because of the haul of move or really a lot of the moving pieces that have taken place when we're talking about guys like Porzingis, guys like Tobias Harris, and the picks and the players that were involved in order to do deals. Maybe that would have raised the stakes some, but I'd be hard pressed to think that if you are the Orlando Magic and you're really desperate to try and figure out where you're headed come next year, that you don't put that guy out there and play and find out who is willing to do something. Maybe if you're a team like like the Los Angeles Lakers or whatever the case may be, that there isn't a way that you still can't get something from that team that will still wind up being a step better than where you are, or even or more so like the Portland Trailblazers, right? So I just felt like there's some missed opportunities from other teams, maybe because they weren't trying to put dudes like that on their radar. But I still think that having a guy like that on that team, I think is still head and shoulders a step in the right direction. Maybe even if say you're the Washington Wizards, right? Because given what's happened now with the whole situation with John Wall, you really have to start looking at the prospects of figuring out a way to keep Bradley Beal. If not trying to move him, you got to start putting pieces around him. They already gave up Otto Porter Jr., so something tells me that they're planning to go in a different direction regardless come this off season. That could start by putting together some players that may actually be a good fit for a guy like Bradley Beal, because you can't afford to lose that type of star player that's giving you the productivity he's getting this year. And it's just weird to me not seeing his name getting bantied about a little bit more by trade deadline.
Yeah, well, the Beal situation in Washington it's I don't know, it's weird. Like you said, they traded Otto Porter, they traded Markieff Morris. So you'd figure like, all right, we're selling off our assets here, pennies on the dollar. Let's go ahead and rebuild. Not that they're gonna take pennies on dollars for Bradley Beal, but figure, all right, they're just gonna restart it, because John Wall is probably not going to be back most of next season on top of it. So if you trade Beal, this is prime opportunity to do that. Build some assets. You're going to be bad the rest of this year, be bad all of next year. And then you can really see what's happening, 2 seasons from now. But they're holding on to him, at least for right now. I think that was probably just a bad move for them. And there's conversation that they're looking to re-sign Ariza and Jeff Green. Like, what are you doing? I mean, those are rotation guys who, they're not really going to do much for your team or your roster. So why are you holding on to them? But Washington continuing to be Washington. And jumping back into the Orlando situation, listen, they don't move Vucevic. They decided to be buyers. And while they got rid of Simmons, they acquired Markelle Fultz, who they're going to hope is going to be, a valuable player for them moving forward. Philadelphia had no reason to hold on to him based on what they're doing, the direction they're going. So Orlando finally answers the bell, gets a point guard who they can hope they can develop alongside Aaron Gordon, alongside Jonathan Isaacs, and now Vucevic as well too. Orlando, making a move that signifies that they're making a playoff push as opposed to going in that direction and selling off their assets.
Man, this has been one hell of a show, Shaw. I can definitely say that. Like, so much is going on, and we actually have to dedicate a show in itself just to talk about the buyout situation I mean, clearly we also, are going to have to address, whether or not, you know, like for example, a team like the Boston Celtics. A lot of people think that the Boston Celtics should have put themselves in play, and the very first question I have to ask them is, play for what? This team probably needs to be deeper. They don't need to be better. If they're going to be better, they should be better knowing that they're going to get a top 5 type of player, because they've already got a ton of quality talented players that are already on the upswing. So when people start talking about how the Celtics needed to trade to get this or trade to get that, I'm just wondering what exactly is it that they're trading to get better at, that they just really just need to be better as a team getting from.
Well, let me address that really quickly. They were in the worst juxtaposition they could possibly be in when it came to this trade deadline. They know Kyrie's a free agent. They have a prize. You know what I mean? Like, this is chess for them. They are going after Anthony Davis. His dad be damned. We had that conversation already. So while they watch Philadelphia, they watch Toronto, they watch Milwaukee, all of the other competitors making major moves within the conference, they had to almost sit on their hands and say, well, we can't make a move right now because we are going after Anthony Davis. Now, had they gotten word that Davis was moving to the Lakers, you might have seen Ainge trying to be like, all right, and he's got a plan for a plan for a plan. He might have been able to say, like, all right, well, maybe we'll do something now to try to go out there and get a talent. But knowing that Davis is out there and that is their prized possession and he is a game changer, that's a checkmate, bro. And he said, no, F it. We'll do what you got to do. And even if that means they can't get to the Eastern Conference Finals, even if that means they can't get to the NBA Finals this year, he had to wait because that is the prize. And while all these other moves are nice and it puts these teams in great positions this season, Anthony Davis is put your team in a position to be contenders for a very long time. And Ainge has a vision, and that's what he believes he can pair him alongside Kyrie Irving and really make a push for the Celtics for the future and hopefully hang banner 18. So tough situation for Boston, but they did what was in their best.
Danny Ainge in the house of Sansa. Look, I agree with you, but I'm also going to say this, Shaw. I think that the other teams may have upped the ante in basically putting the Celtics in that conversation of we're not going to say with the utmost confidence that the Boston Celtics are going to be the best team coming out of the East. That's all that we've done, right? So this isn't a question, because again, what has been the main question that we've been talking going all the way back when we did our previews? Who wants to be the best player coming out of the Eastern Conference? That player on that team is taking that team to the East, is taking them to the finals, okay? And so right now, we had all of our different guests get on, make their bids to say Giannis is going to be the best player and Kawhi is going to be the best player. We're saying it's going to have to be Kyrie Irving, or it's going to have to be Jason Tatum. You know what I'm saying? But no matter how you slice it, Danny Ainge is riding on the idea that Kyrie Irving is going to figure this out. Because had the Raptors or the Bucks or the Sixers gone so over the top in what they were doing and putting together the teams that they're putting together, I don't think it would have forced Danny Ainge to come out of the mindset that, what do? You already have a really talented group that really should be in the Eastern Conference Finals, right? It's just that they just don't look like that. And it's only, the bigger question is, can they put it together in the right time frame so that they're riding a momentum going in? I've always said that it's about the wins that they get in the regular season to afford them that opportunity. But in this particular situation, in this particular case, I think the best case scenario is that this now puts everything in its proper perspective for Danny Ainge about how aggressive he really should be should the Celtics not get to the Eastern Conference Finals or do not get to the NBA Finals, because then it validates why they would have to go after Anthony Davis, because Kyrie Irving clearly is not the answer for them.
Yeah, well, all that makes sense, and I think even like one of the points you made too is timing. You know, had this team not won 9 of its last 10 or whatever it has been, and with only a loss coming to Golden State, maybe he panics and says, all right, well, I see all these other moves happening. We need to go another direction. But right now they're playing good basketball. He can ride out the card, that he has in his hand right now, and then reshuffle the deck, and make a play for Anthony Davis. So, Boston, again, didn't really have a whole lot they could do. They will be interested in the buyout market. They could use another big. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like DeAndre Jordan is going to be available for anybody. But guys like Robin Lopez, Enes Kanter, Marcin Gortat, all those guys may be available, and that can be supplemental pieces, that come to Boston and kind of help them in their front court. But by no small margin, the rest of the teams in the East have made major strides to solidify their place in this conference, and it's going to be a battle. And I can honestly say this, as many have said as well too. After this trade deadline, it's Golden State and then those 4 teams in the West. I mean, in the Eastern Conference. I don't think anybody else in the West, maybe you can say maybe OKC, really has championship aspiration. I think it's Golden State, and then those 4 teams out East who are really just looking like some world beaters right now.
Oh man, it's getting good, man. It's getting good. Woo! Everybody thinks the final season of Game of Thrones is going to end on HBO. No. The real Game of Thrones is when we get to the NBA playoffs, baby. And the NBA trade deadline just set the tenor, set the tone for what's going to happen. Awesome show all around, my brother, man. I'm telling you, it's nervous, man. And by the way, to our listeners, we definitely do have another show coming up because we got to talk about the regular stuff that's happening around in the association because this is all the abnormal stuff. We got so much that's going on. And, once again, Shaw, man, thank you for hopping on board, man, allowing us to put together this emergency pod. Doesn't matter where we are in the world, man. If it breaks, we all up on it.
You know what it is, and I think our listeners know what it is well, too. Hopefully we deliver it on this NBA trade deadline emergency pod, as you alluded to. We'll keep delivering the butter goods, as you like to say, homie. And, again, we'll have another show talking about Team LeBron versus Team Giannis, what all-star picks have happened, and, of course, buyout season. I can't wait to talk on the next show, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Listen, for the baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Keep us locked as we keep you informed with everything happening in the association. For the baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Catch up with you